The frozen ground of the Ardennes forest crackled under the boots of Oberst Heinrich von Stauffen as he surveyed the American fuel depot through his Zeiss binoculars on December 3, 1944. Before him lay thousands of 55-gallon drums containing the precious gasoline that could keep his Panzer Regiment operational for another month. What should have been a desperate gamble for survival would instead become a devastating revelation about the mathematical impossibility of German victory. Von Stauffen commanded the remnants of the 12th Panzer Regiment, once a proud force of 180 tanks, now reduced to fewer than 30 operational vehicles. His fuel situation was critical, perhaps 72 hours of combat operations remaining. The American depot represented salvation, containing what intelligence estimated at over 200,000 gallons of high-octane fuel. It was exactly the kind of bold raid that could change the trajectory of his regiment's war. The raid succeeded beyond his wildest expectations. In a perfectly executed night operation, von Staufen's men infiltrated the depot and made off with 50,000 gallons of premium American gasoline. But as his teams examined captured American logistics documents, a horrifying truth emerged. This depot was just one of 47 similar installations within a 50-mile radius. The Americans weren't just winning through superior tactics or better soldiers. They were winning through the industrial mathematics that rendered German resistance not just difficult, but impossible. Every gallon his men had risked their lives to steal would be replaced within 48 hours by a supply system so vast that their successful raid was nothing more than statistical noise. If you want to discover more incredible stories of how industrial supremacy determined World War II's outcome, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Oberst Heinrich von Stauffen stood in the morning briefing room of his regimental command post, studying fuel consumption reports that told the story of Germany's slow-motion collapse. His 12th Panzer Regiment, once the pride of Army Group Center, now faced the basic arithmetic of military defeat. 15,000 gallons of fuel consumed daily during active operations versus 3,000 gallons delivered weekly through increasingly unreliable supply lines. The mathematics were brutal and undeniable. At current consumption rates, his regiment could sustain combat operations for exactly 72 hours before becoming immobilized targets for American artillery. The fuel situation had deteriorated steadily since the Normandy landings, as Allied bombing systematically destroyed German refineries, fuel storage facilities, and transportation networks that had once kept the Wehrmacht mobile. Major Klaus Weber, his operations officer, presented intelligence reports about American fuel installations in the sector that seemed too abundant to be credible. Aerial reconnaissance indicated massive storage facilities, continuous truck convoys, and fuel distribution networks that operated with apparent disregard for conservation. American forces seemed to consume gasoline as if shortages were impossible rather than inevitable. The target depot lay just 15 kilometers behind American lines, lightly guarded according to reconnaissance reports that suggested either American negligence or confidence so complete that massive fuel reserves required minimal protection. Von Staufen's staff calculated that a successful raid could capture enough fuel to sustain regimental operations through the winter, potentially changing the balance of power in their sector. Dr. Wilhelm Richter, the regiment's supply officer and former petroleum engineer, analyzed captured American fuel samples that revealed superior quality compared to German synthetic gasoline. American fuel contained additives and refinement levels that indicated industrial capacity operating without the material constraints that had forced German chemistry to accept inferior substitutes since 1942. The planning phase revealed the desperate improvisation that characterized German military operations by late 1944. Von Staufen's engineers had captured 3 American trucks during recent fighting, vehicles that would be repainted and used to infiltrate the fuel depot. German soldiers would wear American uniforms stripped from battlefield casualties, their weapons concealed beneath canvas covers that might fool sentries during nighttime operations. Intelligence reports confirmed the depot's significance through intercepted American radio communications that discussed fuel allocation with casual abundance that seemed incomprehensible to German listeners. American commanders ordered thousands of gallons for routine operations that German forces would have considered strategic reserves worthy of careful conservation over weeks or months. The psychological preparation proved as challenging as the tactical planning. Von Staufen's men had been conditioned to view fuel as precious beyond measure, carefully rationed, and desperately conserved. The concept of seizing 50,000 gallons in a single operation seemed almost criminal in its audacity. Yet American carelessness with such quantities suggested either supreme confidence or industrial resources beyond German comprehension. Hauptmann Ernst Fischer, commanding the infiltration team, studied American depot procedures through weeks of careful observation. Guard rotations were casual rather than systematic. Security measures emphasized administrative control rather than military protection, and vehicle traffic flowed continuously without apparent concern for enemy interdiction. The Americans behaved as if massive fuel stockpiles were routine rather than strategic vulnerabilities. The weather forecast provided optimal conditions for the raid. Overcast skies would limit American air reconnaissance, while sub-freezing temperatures would reduce the risk of fuel vapors igniting if combat erupted during the operation. Von Staufen's meteorologist predicted a 4-hour window of opportunity when visibility would be minimal, but road conditions would remain passable for heavy vehicles. Final equipment checks revealed the stark reality of German logistics in late 1944. Ammunition loads were reduced to conserve weight for additional fuel containers. Medical supplies were limited to basic first aid, and radio equipment suffered from component failures that German industry could no longer remedy. Every aspect of the operation reflected resource constraints that American forces seemed immune to experiencing. As December 3rd dawned with the pale winter light of the Ardennes, von Staufen reviewed operational orders that would either extend his regiment's fighting capability or result in its destruction. The fuel raid represented more than tactical necessity. It was a final gamble against mathematical certainty that German defeat had become inevitable through simple arithmetic rather than military prowess. The infiltration began at 2:30 hours on December 4, 1944. When Hauptmann Ernst Fischer's team approached the American fuel depot in captured trucks bearing freshly painted U.S. Army markings. The ease of penetration immediately suggested American security philosophy fundamentally different from German military doctrine: confidence in abundance rather than fear of scarcity. Private Jimmy Morrison, a 19-year-old guard from Iowa, waved the convoy through the checkpoint with casual indifference that would have been unthinkable at a German fuel installation. American sentries seemed more concerned with administrative procedures than security threats, treating massive fuel stockpiles as routine logistics rather than strategic assets requiring military protection. Inside the depot perimeter, Fischer's men encountered systematic abundance that defied German understanding of wartime resource management. Row upon row of 55-gallon drums stretched across 23 acres, organized with mathematical precision that made inventory control appear routine rather than critical. Each section was labeled, numbered, and documented with American efficiency that transformed complex logistics into administrative procedure. Feldwebel Kurt Steinberg, leading the technical team, began fuel transfer operations while conducting reconnaissance that revealed the true scope of American petroleum warfare. Quality testing strips indicated fuel specifications that exceeded German aviation gasoline standards, containing additives and refinement levels that German industry could no longer achieve under any circumstances. This wasn't emergency production. It was systematic abundance applied to military requirements. The transfer operation proceeded with mechanical efficiency as German soldiers absorbed evidence of American logistics superiority that extended far beyond individual fuel quality to systematic resource management. Hydraulic equipment moved drums with ease, inventory systems tracked contents automatically, and quality control procedures exceeded German peacetime commercial standards despite wartime operational urgency. American documentation recovered during the operation revealed supply networks that operated across continental distances without disruption despite supporting global military operations. Delivery schedules indicated continuous replenishment from multiple refineries, transportation systems that maintained regular schedules regardless of weather or tactical situations, and distribution networks that treated transcontinental logistics as routine administrative functions. The psychological impact on Fischer's men intensified as they realized American fuel abundance reflected systematic planning rather than temporary accumulation. Storage facilities were designed for continuous operation rather than emergency measures. Maintenance procedures assumed unlimited replacement availability, and security measures emphasized administrative control rather than military protection, because loss was acceptable rather than catastrophic. Intercepted radio communications revealed American commanders discussing fuel allocation with casual frequency that suggested supply systems so robust that conservation was unnecessary rather than essential. Local units requested thousands of gallons for routine operations, using language that treated massive consumption as normal rather than exceptional, indicating resource availability that German forces couldn't imagine achieving. The depot's administrative building contained logistics documentation that provided devastating insight into American petroleum warfare capabilities. Monthly delivery schedules exceeded German annual fuel production for entire army groups. Replacement procedures operated automatically rather than through emergency requisitions, and inventory management systems tracked millions of gallons with computational precision that German quartermasters had never achieved. Technical analysis of American fuel handling equipment revealed engineering solutions to problems that German forces had accepted as inevitable constraints. Portable pumping systems enabled rapid transfer rates, standardized containers simplified inventory management, and specialized transportation equipment maintained fuel quality during extended storage periods. American logistics had systematically solved challenges that German military tradition had never properly addressed. The fuel quality itself represented another dimension of American industrial superiority that German petroleum engineers found difficult to accept. Chemical composition exceeded German specifications for premium aviation fuel, octane ratings surpassed German military standards, and additive packages included components that German chemistry had never developed for petroleum applications. As dawn approached and extraction became urgent, Fischer's team faced the psychological challenge of completing a successful mission that simultaneously revealed its own strategic irrelevance. They were stealing fuel that would be replaced faster than German forces could effectively utilize it, conducting tactical operations against an enemy whose abundance rendered individual raids meaningless rather than decisive. The successful penetration had revealed not American weakness, but systematic advantages that made German resistance mathematically impossible rather than merely difficult. Every gallon captured represented evidence of industrial capacity that could sustain current operations indefinitely while expanding output for additional theaters if strategic requirements demanded increased production. While Feldwebel-Steinberg's team loaded precious fuel into German containers, Hauptmann Fischer conducted the most devastating intelligence operation of his military career. The documents he discovered in the depot's administrative office would shatter every remaining German illusion about their enemy's capabilities and the mathematical possibility of victory. The first document Fischer photographed was a weekly fuel consumption report for the U.S. Third Army that revealed consumption patterns beyond German comprehension. General Patton's forces consumed 750,000 gallons daily during active operations, more fuel in 24 hours than von Staufen's entire Panzer Corps had received in the previous 6 weeks. The arithmetic was staggering and undeniable. American fuel consumption exceeded German production capacity by ratios that made continued resistance logically impossible. American logistics documentation revealed supply networks operating with abundance that German planners had never imagined possible. The depot under attack was classified as secondary storage, with routine priority for replenishment, indicating that primary facilities contained reserves measured in millions rather than thousands of gallons. German forces measured fuel supplies in hours. Americans planned operations in seasons. Intelligence files contained German fuel production estimates that demonstrated American knowledge of enemy capabilities exceeded German command understanding of their own resources. Enemy analysts had calculated German consumption rates, production limitations, and strategic reserves with precision that enabled accurate prediction of when German forces would become immobilized due to fuel starvation. The Americans knew exactly how desperate their opponents had become. The most devastating revelation came through production statistics that quantified American petroleum warfare capabilities beyond German military comprehension. Standard Oil, Texaco, and Phillips Petroleum were coordinating refinery output that exceeded total Axis fuel production across all occupied territories. American industry was treating wartime petroleum requirements as temporary surge capacity rather than maximum effort mobilization. Technical specifications for American fuel distribution systems revealed logistical engineering that German forces had never attempted to develop. Pipeline networks delivered refined products across transcontinental distances, storage facilities operated with automated inventory management, and transportation systems maintained delivery schedules that German logistics had never achieved within occupied European territory, despite much shorter supply lines. Quality control documentation demonstrated American systematic approaches to petroleum warfare that prioritized reliability over conservation through scarcity management. Statistical sampling ensured consistent fuel quality across millions of gallons. Rejection procedures discarded substandard products that German forces would have accepted as adequate, and testing protocols verified performance standards that exceeded German peacetime commercial requirements. The psychological impact on Fischer's intelligence team intensified as captured documents revealed American petroleum production planning that extended far beyond current military requirements to anticipate post-war reconstruction and global stability operations. Strategic reserves were calculated to sustain current combat operations while simultaneously supporting occupation forces, civilian reconstruction, and international assistance programs that assumed American victory as mathematical certainty rather than military possibility. Financial documentation revealed petroleum industry coordination with military logistics that demonstrated systematic mobilization of civilian resources for strategic objectives. Corporate executives were participating in production planning. Refinery managers were receiving military priorities for output allocation, and transportation companies were dedicating equipment to government service without apparent concern for commercial profitability during wartime conditions. Personnel records indicated American petroleum industry employment levels that exceeded total German industrial workforce across all manufacturing sectors. Refinery operations, transportation networks, and distribution systems employed millions of workers who were simultaneously supporting military requirements while maintaining civilian consumption levels that exceeded European peacetime standards despite global warfare demands. The depot's communication systems provided access to American logistics networks that operated with reliability and capacity that German signals intelligence had never successfully intercepted or comprehended. Radio traffic discussed petroleum movements with casual efficiency that suggested coordination capabilities extending across multiple continents without significant technical limitations or administrative constraints. As Fisher completed his intelligence gathering and prepared for extraction, the evidence he had compiled painted an undeniable picture of American industrial supremacy that rendered German resistance strategically meaningless, regardless of tactical competence or individual courage. They weren't fighting American soldiers, they were fighting American petroleum production statistics that made defeat mathematically inevitable rather than simply probable. The successful fuel raid was revealing its own futility through intelligence that demonstrated how strategic abundance could absorb tactical losses while maintaining operational capabilities that exceeded German understanding of industrial warfare possibilities. The extraction phase of the fuel raid proceeded flawlessly, with German teams successfully withdrawing 50,000 gallons of premium American gasoline while avoiding detection or significant resistance. But as Oberst von Stauffen reviewed the intelligence materials his men had captured, the tactical success transformed into strategic revelation about the mathematical impossibility of German victory. The arithmetic was devastating in its clarity. American petroleum production capacity exceeded 400 million gallons monthly for military use alone, while German synthetic fuel plants struggled to produce 12 million gallons under increasingly difficult conditions. The production ratio of 33:1 meant that American industry could replace German fuel capture faster than Wehrmacht forces could effectively utilize stolen supplies. Dr. Wilhelm Richter's analysis of captured American production schedules revealed systematic petroleum warfare that operated without the constraints limiting German operations. Raw material shortages that forced German chemistry to accept inferior synthetic substitutes didn't exist in American industry, which accessed crude oil from domestic fields and international sources that British naval power protected rather than interdicted. The quality comparisons proved equally demoralizing for German technical personnel, who had taken pride in chemical engineering achievements that overcame resource limitations through scientific innovation. American fuel not only exceeded German specifications, it was produced using conventional refining processes that German industry had been forced to abandon due to raw material shortages and transportation disruptions. Intelligence documentation revealed American logistics planning that anticipated petroleum requirements through 1947, assuming continued warfare at current consumption levels while simultaneously supporting post-war reconstruction and occupation duties. German planners struggled to ensure fuel availability for weekly operations, while Americans calculated requirements for multi-year strategic campaigns across multiple continents. The depot's inventory management systems demonstrated American administrative efficiency applied to petroleum logistics that German quartermasters had never achieved, despite centuries of military tradition emphasizing systematic organization. Computerized tracking systems maintained accurate records across millions of gallons. Automated reorder procedures ensured continuous supply availability, and quality control protocols verified product specifications without human intervention. Captured radio transcripts revealed American commanders discussing fuel allocation with casual confidence that reflected supply systems operating without conservation constraints. Local tactical decisions involved petroleum consumption that exceeded strategic reserves available to German army groups, while routine administrative procedures allocated quantities that represented critical resources worthy of operational planning at the highest Wehrmacht command levels. The financial documentation proved perhaps most devastating to German understanding of enemy capabilities. American petroleum companies were operating at peacetime profit margins while supporting global military operations, indicating production costs so low that wartime demand could be satisfied without economic strain. German synthetic fuel production required subsidies that consumed resources needed for other military priorities. Personnel management records revealed American petroleum industry workforce development that exceeded German educational capabilities across all technical specialties. Training programs produced qualified technicians within months, using systematic methods that German apprenticeship traditions required years to achieve, while maintaining productivity standards that exceeded European peacetime commercial operations despite wartime urgency. The technological advantages became apparent through equipment specifications that demonstrated American engineering solutions to problems German industry had accepted as unavoidable limitations. Refining equipment operated with efficiency levels that German chemistry had never achieved. Transportation systems maintained product quality over distances that German logistics couldn't manage, and storage facilities prevented degradation that German fuel handlers considered inevitable. Environmental controls at American petroleum installations exceeded German peacetime industrial standards, despite wartime operational pressures. Safety procedures protected worker health. Fire prevention systems minimized facility risks, and waste management protocols prevented pollution that German operations had accepted as necessary compromises. American abundance enabled systematic attention to concerns that scarcity forced German industry to ignore. As von Stauffen completed his assessment of captured intelligence materials, the mathematical reality became inescapable. German forces were conducting tactical operations against an enemy whose petroleum production capacity could sustain current military consumption indefinitely while expanding output for additional theaters if strategic circumstances required increased allocation. The 50,000 gallons his men had successfully captured represented 0.0001% of monthly American petroleum production for military purposes. Their tactical achievement was statistically insignificant compared to enemy industrial capabilities that rendered resistance mathematically futile rather than strategically challenging. The fuel raid had succeeded beyond operational expectations, while demonstrating the strategic hopelessness that would define Germany's remaining months of increasingly desperate resistance against industrial mathematics rather than military opponents. December 15, 1944. 11 days after his successful fuel raid, Oberst Heinrich von Stauffen sat in his regimental command bunker, reviewing after-action reports that quantified both his tactical triumph and strategic defeat. The 50,000 gallons of captured American fuel had extended his regiment's operational capability by exactly 18 days, fuel that American logistics had replaced within 48 hours, according to intercepted radio communications. The captured intelligence had been forwarded to higher command, where it disappeared into the bureaucratic machinery of a military leadership increasingly disconnected from battlefield realities. Von Staufen's detailed analysis of American petroleum warfare capabilities received no response from officers who preferred comfortable illusions to devastating mathematical truths about enemy industrial supremacy. Major Klaus Weber reported that American fuel convoys continued flowing past German positions with unchanged frequency despite the successful raid. Aerial reconnaissance confirmed that the targeted depot had resumed normal operations without apparent reduction in capacity or modification of security procedures. The Americans had absorbed a significant tactical loss as routine operational cost, rather than strategic setback requiring countermeasures. Personal letters from home painted a picture of German civilian conditions that contrasted devastatingly with evidence of American abundance his men had witnessed during the depot raid. Von Staufen's wife described ersatz coffee made from roasted grain, while his soldiers had observed Americans discarding genuine coffee. His children wrote about coal rationing, while intelligence documents revealed American petroleum consumption that treated energy conservation as unnecessary rather than essential. The regiment's fuel situation had returned to critical levels despite the successful operation, demonstrating the temporary nature of tactical solutions to strategic problems that required industrial capacity rather than military courage. Von Stauffen calculated that his forces would require successful fuel raids every 3 weeks to maintain operational readiness, a tempo that would guarantee eventual detection and destruction regardless of individual mission success. Technical analysis of American fuel quality revealed petroleum chemistry that German industry couldn't replicate under current conditions despite possessing theoretical knowledge and pre-war manufacturing capability. The additives and refinement levels represented systematic advantages that abundant raw materials enabled rather than superior scientific understanding. American fuel was better because Americans could afford to make it better. Intelligence reports from other sectors confirmed that von Staufen's discoveries represented systematic American capabilities rather than isolated abundance at single installations. Every German unit conducting fuel raids reported similar findings: massive stockpiles, casual security, rapid replacement, and documentation indicating nationwide petroleum networks operating without apparent resource constraints. The psychological impact on von Staufen's officers became apparent through private conversations that reflected growing comprehension of mathematical impossibility they faced. Professional soldiers who had believed in German technical superiority now acknowledged enemy advantages that exceeded tactical competence to encompass fundamental differences in industrial capacity and national resources. Dr. Wilhelm Richter's final report on captured American petroleum documentation concluded that German resistance was prolonging inevitable defeat rather than influencing ultimate outcome through tactical achievements. American production capacity could sustain current operations while simultaneously supporting additional theaters, occupation forces, and post-war reconstruction that assumed victory as mathematical certainty rather than military possibility. The human cost of continued resistance became a moral question that transcended military duty as von Stauffen realized his regiment was sacrificing lives to delay an outcome that petroleum production statistics had already determined. Every casualty suffered in pursuit of impossible victory represented personal tragedy in service of strategic fantasy that industrial arithmetic had rendered obsolete. Communications from higher command continued demanding impossible achievements, while ignoring intelligence reports that documented the futility of resistance against overwhelming material superiority. Military tradition that emphasized duty and sacrifice was being perverted to serve political delusions rather than strategic objectives that remained achievable through available means. If this incredible story of how industrial reality shattered military illusions inspired you, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more amazing tales of how mathematics, not just courage, determined history's greatest conflicts. As December snow began falling across the Ardennes forest, Von Stauffen faced the personal choice between professional duty that demanded impossible sacrifices and human responsibility that recognized mathematical truths. His fuel raid had succeeded tactically while revealing strategic realities that would define the final months of a war already decided by petroleum production rather than battlefield prowess.